Hi, my name is Mickey Ferrugiaro and this is the tutorial for my contemporary geometric beadwork inspired bowl. I have two bowls, two versions of it. This one is my black, white and red all over, and this one is my peacock bowl. They're large projects. You're going to use 130 grams of beads, just the Delicas alone. But it is worthwhile. It's a really nice project to do. It's fun to bead, and I think it's something you'll be proud of when you complete it. The black, white and red all over, as you can see, has designs on the panels. Those designs repeated 3 times, 4 different panels, and a nice little floral bottom. The wings that join together with our fire polish. We have points with Swarovski pearls on the ends. If you don't want to work that hard following all the pattern work, then you can make a peacock bowl, which is a lot easier simply because we're only using one color per row. It's also a great thing if you've got lots of oddments of Delicas, because you can use them up on this bowl. You do need about 50 grams of your main color for your wings and the rolls. So it's a fun one. I hope you'll all enjoy making it, and I'm really looking forward to seeing some new colorways. So let's get started. Okay, so here we are ready to start our base, and I'm just going to show you it on the blue version. And you can see we start off with a 3mm. This is a section we're going to create first, and then we build out from there. Okay, so we're using a 3mm round bead or pearl in the center, and then we're using some 15 Delicas. So I'm going to put 3 on, and I'm going to go back through the pearl. And I'm going to put 3 on this side, and on my illustration you'll see this is kind of where I get. I don't show you going through here just because it was messing up on the threads. It was easier to show you this, so we're going to go through there, and then we're going to come back through these 3 baby Delicas. Okay, so that's the start. You'll see as we work this next row, those will all space out. Okay, so a little difficult to hold at this point. Our next row, we're counting this as row 1, so row 2, we're going to work in peyote stitch using bee beads. So just all the way around. And you can see that this will even up those little 15s. Okay, and at the end we're going to step up. So that's row 2. Okay, row 3 is exactly the same, again using our bee beads with 1 bead in between for each stitch. And step up. So I have in the tutorial given you how many stitches and how many beads for every row. That way you can always check yourself so that you don't mess up, because it's easily done. Okay, so there we have row 3. For row 4 we're going into D beads, which for me is this red one, and I'm going to put 2 beads into each stitch. So now we'll have 6 stitches and 12 beads. And on the step up on this one, so we add our last stitch, we're just going to step up through the first of that first pair. Okay, so that's where we're at now. Okay, and for row 5, we're going to alternate colours. Between the pairs, we're going to add the black bead, which is our C bead. And so as I've come out of the first of the pair, I'm going to go through the second bead of the pair. Then I'm going to add a red bead and go again through the first of the next pair. Use a black bead to split the pair. And then a red up through the first bead of the next pair. Split the pair with the black, and then we're at red. Split the pair with the black again, a red in between, and split the pair with the black, red in between, split the pair with the black, and our last bead, which is red, and we'll go step up straight through the black. Okay, on to row 6, and row 6 is really nice and easy. We're moving into an E bead, and we're going to put 1 bead per stitch. So this is row 6. Nice easy row. Of course, if you're working on the blue version, the stripy version, you're just looking at different rows. You'll be following the amount of beads per row, but you'll just be working in one color all the way around. Okay, and we're stepping up through that first gold. Okay, so there we are after row 6. For row 7, we're going to add 2 beads per stitch, and we're going to do that with the gold beads. So 2 of our E beads in every stitch. We want the base to be flat. We don't want it to bow out or to be wavy or anything. And a lot of that you'll see as we're doing in the graduations. Sometimes when we add 2 beads at a time, we'll actually treat them as 1 bead, and then the next time we'll actually do 2 and separate them. So the further out we go, the more gradual the increasing. When you're working small, your increases have got to be, kind of faster. And on our last stitch, when we step up, we're going to step up right through that pair because we're going to keep that pair together this time. And you'll see exactly what I mean as we work through. Okay, so that was row 7. So as row 7 had 12 stitches and 24 beads, row 8 has got 12 stitches and 12 beads because we're just going to put one bead through each pair. So we're going to treat those pairs as one bead. And you can see this evens out. If they're crunched up a little bit, this will even them out as we work this row. Oh, get carried away there. Oh, it's one at a time. Okay. And you can see I keep pressing on it, you know, every stitch. Just keep it nice and flat. I want this to be a really nice flat base. A little shaker there. I am in California, but that wasn't an earthquake. That was just me being clumsy. Okay, so last stitch and step up. Okay, keep it nice and flat. Give it a nice tug there for our beads to just even out in there. So there we go. Okay, so row 9, we're going back to having 2 beads per stitch, and we're going to work in the bee beads. And you can see this is going to allow us to split those beads so much easier. That one was way too tight, we couldn't split there, so you treat them as one and then the next one will split. That's how you get a nice gradual increase. And I always say if you've got an increase row, don't pull your thread really tight. You know, you want to have a little bit so it allows for another bead to come in. I think that's where some people get into problems in increasing, is that if they're weaving tightly, their thread has got nowhere to lift for that extra bead. Gold bead sitting up there. There we go. Pushing him down, making him do as he's told. Okay, and this time when you step up, you're just going to step up through the first of the first white pair. Row 10. On row 10, we're going to split the whites with a red bead. So we're going to go through the second one of that pair. And then in between, we're going to add a white bead, one of our bee beads. Go through the next bead. So you're splitting that pair up. Add a red, a white, go through the next bead. Red to split the pair. A white bead, a red to split that pair, and a white, red to split, white, red in the split, we have a white bead, a red between, and the white, red in the split, white, red in the split, white. Just keeping it flat all the time. Here we are, red, our white, red, making it nice and flat, getting a little bit tight, but we're almost round. Last red, and our last white, and then we're stepping up through that red. Okay, so there we go. That's row 10. For row 11, we're just going to work one stitch of red, or one red bead per stitch all the way around. Okay, and then we'll be back for row 12. Here we are after row 11, and you can see it's nice and flat. If yours isn't, you need to check your tension. Okay, you should be nice and flat. Put it on a hard surface and press down on it until it gets, you know, to the nice flatness that you need. If it doesn't, then you've got to change your tension. Okay, so row 12. Here we're going to add 2 of our black beads, and they're going to sit above the white bead, and then we're going to put a red bead between the reds. The black is going to be our background, and we're going to have red spots, so that's what we're working on right now. And again, keep your tension fairly slack. You know, you don't want it to be really tight, because we really want to, these will pull straight when we work the next row, but you've got to have a little bit of give on your thread for that. It's always something I like to stress: when you're increasing, extra thread, work a little looser. And if you have skinny beads in, sometimes you end up with some beads that are a little skinnier than others. This is a good place to use them. I've got some that I will cull a little bit, so that anything that's skinny I use in these kind of increases. And you know, it might be one fatter one and one skinnier one. It won't get noticed once you work, you know, you've worked it around, but it can help sometimes. Delica's are pretty even, though lately I've had some patches that were a lot of skinnies and some big ones in there, so I guess they were having a bad machine day. It's got to be tough to make all these tiny little beads and get them all perfect. Okay, on our last red. And we are stepping up on this. We're going to step through both of the blacks. Whenever it's tight like that, you know we're going to step up between two of them and treat them as if they're one bead. Okay, so our next row, we're going to work all in reds. So we're going to work 2 reds and go through the black, treating them as one bead. And like I say, when you're doing this, you get that extra thread, it'll just lift those out of their hole a bit, and that's fine. And it'll give them a little bit extra space to breathe. If you've got it too tight, you're more likely to have all your beads of the row not fitting in. So we really play with that looser tension. And of course that's also something that you notice with the finish on a bead. A bead with a heavier coating, you're going to have more problems getting it in the spaces. So just allow that tension a little bit looser and it will save you a lot of grief. So you see our red spots forming there. Almost around. You can see how it helps those blacks when the tension's there and it pulls out more so that they sit a bit better. Tension, tension, tension. That's all about beading. Tension is key. Okay, and then we're going to step up. Okay, and you can see as we get that little flute going on, we just want to put it onto a hard surface and give it a press down. And then we get back to this. Okay, so here we are, row 14. And we're going to put a red to finish off our spot. And then we're going to work our 2 blacks on top of our 2 blacks. And of course these are the ones that will get separated. You see they've got a bit more space to work in. Okay. And that's what you're going to work all the way around. 2 blacks, 1 red. And we'll come back after this row. You can see how this is laying here before I hop off here. When we split these, those beads will lay great. You know, where if they're a little twisted now, it'll all work out. So don't worry about that, okay? All right, finish this row. I'll come back for the next. Row 15. For row 15, we are going to start with a C bead, which is our black. And basically we're working a black and white row with our white beads splitting our black pairs. So you're having 2 blacks, and then when you get into the pair, you're going to add a white. Okay? So black, black, through the first of the black pair, white bead, and through the second bead of the black pair. Okay, so that's what you're working on for this row. We'll be back for row 16. We're looking at 36 stitches and 36 beads. So there is row 15, and now we're on to row 16. Row 16, we're going to put a white bead at the side of the white, so 2 white beads go in there, and then we're going to join the blacks up with a black. Just 1 bead per stitch, nice and easy. 36 stitches, 36 beads, 2 white, 1 black, all the way around. Okay, we'll be back for the next one. There is row 16 in, and we're ready to start row 17. Nice easy one for row 17. Again, we're working in the black and whites, a white between the 2 whites and then 2 blacks. So we're just kind of reversing this row. Okay, and our 2 blacks going in there. And these are going to be the white spots. Okay, so you can see how that's working. All the way around. We'll come back to the next row. So here we are after row 17. And row 18 is a nice and easy one. We're just going to put a whites over the whites and blacks over the blacks. All the way around. "36 stitches, 36 beads. Okay, so continue that all the way around, and I'll meet you for the next row. So here is row 18 complete, and I'm pressing down on a hard surface after every row. It's a lot like when I used to sew. We used to press after every seam, after everything you did, you pressed, and that made for good clothes. I think it makes for good beading too when you're trying to work on the flat. So definitely a little tip to complete. You can see this is really nice and flat. That's just perfect. So it's a good tension and close beadwork, but a good tension and lots of pressing, and you will achieve this. Okay, so row 19 is a lot like row 18, except it's in reverse. Here we're going to have 2 blacks and 1 white. Our previous row was 2 whites and 1 black, so we're just switching that around. And you can see this row is going to be a little bit looser, and that's because we're going to increase on row 20. So just work this in. You're finishing your little white dots. You can see that there. That's completing our little white spot. And our black as the background. So keep going. Work this row. We'll be back for row 20 and increasing. Okay, so here we are after row 19. And you will have noticed that that row was very loose. And you really needed to keep your tension loose on that one. Otherwise, it would have curled up. You can see it just would have curled up like that. You want to make sure that that tension is kept really loose. We're going to take that tension up with this next row. So in between our blacks, we're going to add 2 of our gold beads. And then we're going to work 2 blacks. And again, keep your tension really nice and loose so that this stays flat. 2 blacks and then 2 golds in the next stitch. Black, black, and 2 golds. You can see it's very loose around here, so when we work the next rows we're going to be increasing in here, and that will tighten it back up again. So just make sure that you're keeping it flat, really important. Okay, so finish up this row and we'll be back for the next one, row 21. So here we are after row 20, and I've kept it nice and flat. It's still a little bit wobbly on the edge, but you can still make sure that it stays really nice and flat. Okay, again, watch your tension. And when we stepped up at the end of the row, I just stepped up through the first of the first gold pair. And into that gold pair, we're going to add another gold bead. This is row 21. And then we're going to work 3 of our black beads. 1, 2, 3, and go through the first of our gold beads, add a gold, and go through the second of that pair. Okay, and you'll start to feel this firming up on the edge. Two and 3 through the first one, add a gold, and through the second one. Sure sits nice. Okay, so work this all the way around and we will come back for row 22. And here we're looking at 48 stitches and 48 beads. Our little baby is growing. Okay, so here we are with row 21 finished, and for row 22 again we're working in our gold beads. We're going to work a gold and then 2 whites and back to our gold, and that's our repeat. So gold, white, white, gold. Okay, all the way around. With row 22 complete, we're moving on to row 23. And I'm just going to mention something here because it's like perfect time. I know some people, when they're trying to do a circular thing, they end up with more of an angular look to things. And people say, how do you get it to be circular? Well, one of the tricks is not putting your increases in obvious places. You kind of have to, if you look here with the gold, this looks like a good place to put an increase. But if you put the increase there, you're going to end up with angles. You have to stagger where you put your increases to keep a nice circle. So we're going to be increasing, but we're going to be increasing between these 2 beads rather than the obvious place. So that's one of the points on how to keep a nice circle when you're beading in the round. Okay, so row 23, we will do this increase. And we're going to be working in black beads for our background. So 2 blacks in between our whites. That's our increase. And then a black. And this black's going to just kind of push my golds together. And I'm going to put the gold between the gold to finish off that spot. Okay, so what these blacks are going to do is, as we work around, they're going to jimmy this around so that they push these beads together, and that gives more space for those 2 black beads to sit. Okay, so just see there. All right, so that's all there is to this row. 1 black, 2 blacks in the next stitch, one black and one gold. So we have 48 stitches, but we have 5 beads. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in our 12 sections, so that's 60 beads. So 48 stitches, 60 beads. I'll finish this row and we'll be right back to even this one out. Row 24 coming up next. Row 23 complete, and now we're on to row 24. And for row 24 we're going to start with a white bead, and we're going to go through those 2 blacks, that black pair, and treat them as 1 bead. Whenever they're a little tight like that, you can see this coming. It's like, yep, we got to treat them as 1 bead. And we go white, and then we have 2 blacks at the side of our gold, and the white through the pair of blacks and a white. And you can see how we had that floppiness. We've lost that floppiness completely. It's back to being a nice firm cracker. It's the only thing I can think of is like a cracker. Thin and straight and flat, just like a cracker. Might be because I've been watching the Great British Baking Show. It's in my head. Okay, so that's all there is to this row. Work all the way around. You see those little stripies coming out there? You know, my black and white stripes. I love them. Okay, so work this and we'll come back for row 25. And there's only 26 rows for the base of this, so we're almost done. So here we are after row 24. Row 25, we've got another little increase here. We're going to add 2 black beads over the existing pair of black beads. And then we're going to work a white, black, and a white. Then we're back to our black pair. Then white, black, white. Okay. So you can see how that's shaping up. Okay, so get this row done just like that. We'll be stepping up just through the first bead of that first black pair. Okay, so here we are after 25 rows. Nice firm little cracker. And our 26th row is our final row of working the base, and we're going to work it all in black beads. We're going to split our black pairs with a black bead, and then we're working 4 beads in black. So all black all the way around, and splitting the pair when you get to it. Through the first of the pair, add a bead through the second of the pair. Okay, and that is the last row. So I'll come back when this is finished and we'll talk about the next step. Okay, so that is our 26 rows and our base is completed. And the next step that we'll be doing is creating 2 sides. We're going to work into these black beads and we're going to create so that we can work this way and that way. And that's so that we can work the inner section of the bowl and the outer section of the bowl. So that's going to create our nice little platform for it. You can see here this was going to go inside, and then we'll be building this roll on one side, and then these points will be started on the other side. So inside, outside. That's up next. So now here we are with the base complete, and we're going to add what I call the dividing rows. And that is we're going to put 2 rows in. One is going to go this way and the other one is going to go that way. One is for the inner bowl and the other's for the outer bowl. And all we do to create this is we're going to work 2 rows in white delicas. That's your B bead. And it's just 1 bead per stitch all the way around. And then once we've done that, we're not going to step up at the end. So we're going to come straight back through that black bead, and then we're going to work another identical row so that we end up with 2 white beads sitting next to each other. As we put these in, the other white beads will look like that. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do, and I'll come back to show you once I've finished it. Okay, so here we are with the dividing rows done. You can see both of them there, and I have stepped up through the top row, because depending which way you have it, it's both the same. It does not matter which row you work into, as long as you work in all of the same one. And what we're going to do now is a few rows that brings the bowl out a little bit and up a bit before we actually divide into the panels for the bowl, you know, that we're going to do all the points on. Okay, so this row, actually 2 rows, we're going to work in the red beads. So just 2 rows of these, and we will come back. You're working all these, so you're working into these white beads, then you'll work into the red beads. Okay, so here we have the inner bowl rows 1 and 2 in, and you can see it's just beginning to curve up into a bowl, which is just what we want. And our next row, we're going to have a little increase in. We're going to bring in some little 15 seed beads. And for this row, we're going to work with our seed beads, our black delicas, and these little 15s. And we're going to work 3 of the black delicas, and then in the next stitch we're going to add 2 of our little 15s, just to increase that just slightly, and then we're going to work 1 black. So that's our repeat, and basically you're going to have 4 black stitches with a little double stitch in between. So if we count it from there, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then our 2 15s. One, 2, 3, 4, and our 2 15s. Okay, so you're going to work that all the way around. You'll have 1 of the seed beads left here to fill this 4 in, and then step up. And the next row is really simple. It's all done in B beads. So you're going to treat the little 15s as 1 bead, and then work the rest all in the B beads. Okay, 1 bead per stitch. So you're beginning to see the edge of the bowl as it's creeping up. And now we're on to row 5. For row 5, we're going to work in our black delicas, and we're going to just work in black until we come to our little 2 15s. And what we're going to do there is we're going to add 2 delicas above those 15s. So we're increasing that increase a little bit. And that is all we've got for this round. And the next row is just white again. So again, you'll be putting whites. We've got a little bit of black and white striping going on here. So you'll just be putting a white on top of the whites and treating the 2 blacks as 1 bead. Okay, so that's all there is for these rows. Blacks with 2 blacks over the 2 15s, blacks all the way around. And then row 6 is just whites, your bee beads. Okay, so I'm going to work on those 2 rows and we will come back and with 2 more rows before we start working on the panels themselves. Okay, so here we are after row 6 and you can see that bowl shape coming along quite nicely. And the next row, row 7, we're going to work in gold. So in the regular stitches, the single stitches, we're putting a gold, and then over the 2 delica gap, we're going to put one of our little 3mm rounds, our pearls. Okay, so you can see how that sits. This looks really pretty in the bowl when it's completed. So all you're doing is the 4 golds, three and 4, and then a pearl in the large gap. Okay, so work that all the way around, and then the next row is just done in gold beads, so 1 bead per stitch, and we'll be back after that. So now that we've finished row 8, we're going to start and divide the rows up for their panels. We're going to increase over the little 3mm round, the F bead, and that's where all our increases will be. So the points that you see in the bowl, this is where they're going to be. They're going to come out from here. So what I've done is I have divided each panel. I've given all the panels a name, so they're R, S, T, and U, and we'll repeat those as we go around. So we'll do that once, then again, and then again, and we'll back. However, because we're starting on the E bead, this will be our first bead right here, and it will be from the last panel. So that's a U panel, so we'll be starting with the last bead of a U panel and the first bead of an R panel. Okay, so let's get on with that. So the last bead of our U panel is a black, and the first bead of our R panel is a gold, an E bead. So that's a C and an E. And I'm just going to go in the next one so that these beads sit over that little red round. Okay, don't worry about the gap in them. That's kind of what we want, because that's where we're going to build our increases. Okay, so then we continue with panel R, which is, then we'll do a B. We have 2 C's. Then we go back to a B. And then over our next red round, we're going to put the last bead of the R panel, which is an E bead, a gold bead, and then the first one of the S panel, and the S panel is also an E. Okay, I write these beads so that there's a little slash between them in the pattern, in the tutorial, so that you can kind of be aware of what you're doing each stitch. The more you do this, it just becomes second nature. Okay, so panel S continues with a B, 2 C beads, a B, and our last bead is an E, and we need the first bead of the T panel, which is also an E. Okay, and then we're going to work the T panel, which is 4 C's, Nice and easy. Working with a long thread here. Okay, that's our 4 C's. Our last bead of the T panel is an E bead. And then the first bead of the C panel, and then the first bead of the U panel is a C. So we're going to add that in, and then we're going to work 4 of our C beads. And now we're back to start that pattern all again, because that's the one section is done and we've got 2 more to do. So we're just going to repeat that. So we start back at the beginning, and it's 1 C, the last of the U panel, and then 1 E, which is the first bead of the R panel, and then we have 1 B, 2 C, 1 C, 2 C, a B, and then we're at our increase. So the last bead of the R panel is an E, the first bead of the S panel is an E. So continuing with the S panel, we've got a B, 2 C's, and a B, and then the last bead of the S panel is an E, and the first bead of the T panel is an E. So continuing with the T panel, we have 4 C beads, black beads, and the last bead on the T panel is an E, and the first bead on the U panel is a C bead. In we go, and then work the U panel with 4 C's. Okay, and we're ready to start again. So here we've got our C and E, then a B, 2 C's, a B, 2 E's above for the increase, above that red bead, and then we're going 1 B, 2 C, a B, and 2 E's in the increase, and then we have 4 C, then we have an E and a C on this one, which is our last, and then we have 4 of our C beads. And on this we're going to step up through the first bead of the first pair. so that we're ready for row 2. Okay, the first thing I'm going to show you is how to work with a chart. What a great thing to do is have one of these little magnetic boards, and then you can buy sheets of magnetic paper, and I've just cut a 2-inch strip off one of them, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to place it under my next row. So what I'm doing here, I've already done row 1 in the setup row, so I've gone underneath row bead number 2, row number 2, and I've put it underneath that bead and made a straight line across. And when I'm going to work, I'm going to look at the full bead that's showing, so the one that sits right on top of it. So here it would be a B, B, C, 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 B, B. Okay, and then when I finish that row, I will move it up half a bead to be under the 3rd row, and so then I can see that whole bead. Okay, so that's you just keep moving it up half a bead each time you've done a row. So that's how we work on from charts, and we're going to be working from our words, because it's a lot easier on this pattern. But you can use your board in the same manner, and it's kind of nice so you can keep track of your rows. So you can put that on there, and we know this is the row we're working on. Now you'll see I have these letters on top, and these are for the panels. I had done them A, B, C, D, and then when I was working with the beads I realized just how confusing that would be. So I renamed them R, S, T, and U. So those are the 4 panels, and you will start like we did on the first round, where you've got the last bead of the of panel U, and then the first bead of panel R. So I've shown you that as we've gone around on the last row, but this is how I'm writing it for the panels. So you'll see that the beads from the last row and the first row, the ones that will go into the increase stitch, are separated by a line, so that and also I've color coded to make it really easy for you. So we know that we've got a black, which is the U panel, and a B, which is the R panel. So those two go in the point, then we work our row, and then our next point is going to be the last bead of the R panel, the first bead of the S panel. We continue working that. Then when we come to the next point, we've got the last bead of the S panel and the first bead of the T panel. Work that row, that panel section, and then we have the last bead of the T panel and the first bead of the U panel. Okay, and then you've got to go back and repeat that twice more. These are long rows, and they're only going to get longer, so dig in. Hopefully this is going to be nice and clear for you. And what I suggest is every time you complete this, check it off. So you should have 3 check marks on here before you move down to your next row. At the end of the row, you'll be stepping up through the first bead of the first pair, so it'll be that one. Okay, this is from the U panel and the R panel. You go up through the U bead. Okay, so now we've gone through that, we'll actually see it in action. Okay, so here we are to start row 2, and we're starting with the last bead of the U panel and the first bead of the R panel. Happens to be a C and a B bead. Go through the second one of the pair, and then we have to work 1 B, 3 C's, and 3, a B bead, and we're going through the first bead of that pair. Then we're going to add the last B bead of the R panel and the C bead, the first C bead of the S panel. Go through the second bead of the increase, of that increase pair. Okay, so you're seeing how this works. And now we're continuing with the S panel. And the S panel goes with a C bead, and then we have a B, an E, a B, a C, up into the increase through the first bead, and then we're going into our last bead of the S panel, which is a C bead, and the first bead of our T panel, which is an E bead. Okay, and then we work one more E and 3 C beads. And we finish with an E going into that increase. And the last bead of the T panel is an E. The first bead of the U panel is a C. So gold and black. That goes in our increase. And then we have 5 C beads. Oops. And our 5 going into the increase. And that is the 4 panels, so then we'll repeat these around. I have done a couple of easy panels, in that this one, as soon as you've got a few rows done, you'll see that you're basically putting the same color over the same color all the time. And on the U panel, it's just vertical stripes, so it kind of makes life a little bit easier. Your first panel, our panel, is spots wrapped in honeycomb, and your T panel is a harlequin. So 2 that you've really got to watch on, and 2 that you don't have to watch so much on. Okay, so finish this row all the way around, and then just continue working those rows. I'll check back in occasionally and show you the progress so that you can see just how it looks once the patterns have begun to show, so that you know what you're looking at. Because you can look at your charts and see that too. But that's really what you need to do. Like I say, I've shown you how to read the pattern, and it's just a matter of following the beads row by row. So here we are, and I have done 14 rows, so you can see all the patterns in there now. We have our circles in honeycomb, we have our vertical stripes, our harlequin, and our horizontal stripes all going around. So this is what you should be looking at, and you'll find that when you're working this, as you work on each point, you can actually bend them out so that they're nice and easy to work on. Then just pop them back in as you're working around. You should have that flexibility in this. So that's what you do. You can pinch your points together to tighten it all up again. Okay, so you see how that's going to work. Here we are after row 24. You can see all the designs of the panels showing now, and we still have the flexibility so that you can put your, when you're working on a panel, you can put it out straight to make it easier, and then just pop it back. You'll be able to do that for a couple more rows, and then we'll be locked into this shape, into this pointy shape. Okay, so for row 25, the only difference is in the points. We're no longer adding our last bead and first bead. We're going to add an F bead. So that's the only difference in these rows. You're going to continue your rows as you were working them, but we'll just have the F beads now. Okay, so we'll come back after this row. You're going to step up through the F bead at the end of the row. So you're stepping up through the first F bead at the end of the row. And we'll be back for row 26. So that's row 25 in, all our little beads on top of our points. And for row 26, you're just going to go back to working in the beads. You've got nothing to worry about here. You're just starting straight around. So we're going to start with a C bead. And you can see that these beads are going to sit on top. If I turn it sideways, you can see better there. They're just going to sit on top of the others, and it's kind of going to end up with a 4 bead point with the round bead sitting on top of the 4 beads. So that's what you're aiming to achieve. And other than that, it's just nice and easy beading all the way around. Follow the tutorial for the rows if you haven't got the pattern down by now. But that's it. I'm going to come show you the start of row 27, which is where we're going to be starting the decreasing. Okay, so row 27, and then you'll be on your own for a while. Okay, so here I am at the end of row 26, and I've just come through the red bead, and I'm going to step up through the first bead on the panel. Now we're going to have to keep its shape, so if you can hold it by pinching your points in. And we're basically just going to be working our row straight around, and then when I get to the next point, I'll show you the decrease. It's nice and easy. From this point out, you're working downhill. Your rows are going to get smaller each time. 12 beads smaller each row. And just your same patterns going around. Hopefully you'll have your pattern down and you won't have to look at your charts at this point. Sometimes just seeing how you hold things is worth a lot. We're not going to have the option of opening these panels out anymore. Of course, working with points, it's easy to get your thread caught. As we're coming back, we pinch the next point. Get my colours right. Okay, and so here we are as I'm doing my last stitch. This is the decrease, and basically what we're going to do is just skip. So it's like a little skip stitch. So I'm just going to bring my thread in front, pinch those beads together and come across. So we pull those beads, and like I mentioned earlier, you see you've got your 4 beads You can just see the 4 beads there with the red bead on top. And that's all that you're doing. So you're just going to follow your steps around and, you know, follow the charts, put your beads into their pattern, and you're just going to skip. So every row you'll be skipping on here. So you'll be coming out of this bead and then coming in this bead. Okay. All right, so there you go. We are to just coax it into its spot. Make sure we're all there. And we're ready for decreasing everything in. So next time we'll be back when I have finished all of these panels and the inner bowl will be complete. Okay, so here we are after row 45. All of our panels are done and the bowl is definitely holding its shape now. And the next row that we need to do, we're going to work a little rim. And we basically want to get all these little curves going back into a nice smooth circle. So that's where we're going to start. And we're going to start working with some red beads. So this is the D bead. And what we're going to do here is we're going to work a row using the red. So it'll be all the way around so it's nice and easy. So it's just 9 beads, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, getting caught on all of my points. 8 and 9, and in the point, so here instead of doing a decrease, we're going to add one of our little F beads. Okay, so you can see how that's going to end up pulling things a little bit straighter around. And just continue around like that. So this is row 1 of the top rim. It's the inner rim. Okay, so work that row and we'll come back for the next one. So here we are, I started row 2. You can see that row 1 really straightened those curves up, and row 2 will continue to do that. And as you can see, when you get to your bead, the F bead, you're just going to work it normally, so you'll have the beads really close to it. Okay, so work that row and we'll be back for row 3. So here we have row 2 done, and you can see this has definitely straightened up these wings out here, and we're going to continue with that. Our next row is going to be done with our C beads, so the black bead here, and it's just 1 bead per stitch until we get to our gap created by the 3mm bead. We're going to add some little black and white stripes in here, just like we did back down there. In the end, we're just doing little black and white stripes around for the rim. I like to put my black and white stripes in somewhere. Whatever I'm doing, I try and sneak them in. Okay, so when you get to the round bead, we're going to put 2 beads over that gap. Okay, and then just continue around. So that's the only kind of difference in this row. And you may as well do the next row, which will be done in the white beads, in the bee beads. And you're going to do that just in regular peyote. And when you come to these two, you're just going to treat them as one bead. So you're just going to go through both of them at the same time. Okay, so work this row with your 2 beads over your 3mm, and then the next row just in white delicas, and we'll be back. So here we are with rows 3 and 4 in, and you can see each one now just brings us a little bit closer to that nice circle. We're going to do another little decrease on this row, and we're just doing it in the stitch. So this row's worked in your C beads, the black beads, just regular peyote, and we're just gonna squeeze up that big stitch a little bit more. So when we get to that 2 bead gap, we're going to add 2 of our little G beads, our little black 15 seed beads, just so that smushes it up a little bit more. Our next round on black, we'll end up putting a single delica on top of there, so we'll have scooched it all back down to just delicas. Okay, so this row, blacks with the 2 15s over the 2 delicas, and then the next row, just white. And again, treating those 2 15s as one bead. 120 beads, or 120 stitches, and 132 beads with those little ones. But still the same 120 stitches. So we'll be back after I have this row in and the next white one. We are with rows 5 and 6 in. And you can see now why I call this an inner rim, because it just starts to curve in that little bit, and that's just what we want. We're going to make it curve in a little bit more as we continue. Okay, so for row 7, we're working in the black delicas, and it's black delicas all the way around. So when you come to your little 2 15s, you are just going to put your delica on top. We're almost there. That's one of the nice things about increasing in the stitch by adding more beads or larger beads. It's just really nice and easy and gradual, and you don't have to worry about going in between beads and it leaving gaps. So here we are above our little 2 15s, and a delica just fits perfectly in there. Okay, let's see it from that side. Okay, so here we are after row 7. You can see it's kind of the rim's really leaning in now. That's perfect, what we want, and you can see our circle is getting better as we progress. And our next section of the tutorial I have written not in the round, so you're not looking at a round, you're looking at a straight piece of beadwork. And that's just because it's the easiest way to show you the next steps, which are lots of regular rows. We've just finished row 7. And we're going to be going on to row 8. And you can see it's just straightforward white, and then black, white, black. And then we come up to row 12. And for row 12, we're going to bring in our little 15 delica again. And we're going to work a row in 15 delicas. Then we'll go back to a row in 11 delicas, and then another row of 15 delicas. And what that does is it brings the beadwork further into the center, and it's because when we put our tubing in, we want this roll to sit nicely on top of the beadwork. We don't want it too far in, and we don't want it hanging off the edge. So we're going to pull this in and it'll snug it right into the center, just where we want it. Okay, so we're going to work, you can see till this first, our silver bead, it'll be gold on the red ball. We're going to work to there, and then we'll be putting the tubing in. So just work your rows from rows 8 up to row 20, and then we'll be back to start increasing and of course putting that tubing in. So here we are with the inner rim and starting the top row. So you can see we are up to row 20, and you can see that got a nice curve on it ready for our roll, and the bowl's nice and firm at this point. Okay, tubing. We're adding 6mm tubing, and what you want to do is when you wrap this around, you'll overlap it so that you wrap it snugly around, right around there, overlap it, make a little mark where it will be. So if you imagine this is cut to size right now, but if you imagine that one end is going further on, you just put a little line where it meets from one end and then cut it. And then 4mm tubing that here I've wrapped in a little bit of tape just because it wasn't giving me a tight fit. Some of it does, some of it doesn't. It seems to vary batch to batch. And you can see this is going to be my joiner for the tubing. And it's okay if it's, you know, a little bit. Once you get into it, it'll be encased in the beading and it will hold together. So you wrap it around your bowl, making sure your thread is, it's best if you put your needle in the bowl and your thread so you don't get it caught. And then wrap it all the way around and then just connect it. Just like that. Oh, we didn't get it all the way around. There we go. And you'll see that's a nice snug fit for the bowl. It's about 13 inches, but as I say, measure it each time because it depends on the tension of your beading. And you want it to join nicely so that you get a smooth look when you've got it. You know, you don't want it with a gap in it. You want it nice and smooth. Okay, so now we're going to be working over the tubing. And we're going to start that with row 21. So here we are for row 21, and we're just working first in our red 11 seed delica bead. And then when we get to our little gold seed bead, we're going to put 2 of our little red 15 delicas over the top. And that will just open that up a little bit. That's our increase. So all it is, all the way around, are 4 regular size delicas and then 2 15 delicas over the seed bead. People ask me why a 15 delica and why not a 15 seed bead. Well, here is the comparison. You can see that the 15 delica is a bit longer and that the seed bead is a little bit wider. So it makes it a different type of bead to use. If you've got a tight space, then a 15 seed bead, you know, can work. But one of the things when you're doing a project like this is getting the colors correct. Sometimes if you've got a shade off, it can look bad. So the great thing with it being a delica is it's going to match my other delica. I have no worries on it. It's just, you know, if they do a small size in it, they do a large size in it, so you know that you can get them to match. If you are choosing your own colors, always look for the 15 delica first, because you choose your color from the 15 delica because you know you can get an 11 in it. The other way around, not necessarily. Okay, so that's why 15 delicas. They're also fabulous to use for fringe work. If you've never done fringe work with them, you're in for a treat because they really make your fringes beautiful when you're doing bead fringing. Just love them for that. Okay, so that's really the row. And the following row is all in the red beads, in your D beads. And when you're going around, you're just going to again treat these little 15s just as one bead. Okay, so work this row, work the next row, and I will meet you back there. Okay, so there are rows 21 and 22 in, and row 23 we're going to continue our little increasing and increasing in the stitch. So we're just going to work around to where we have our little 215s. And then when we get over those 215s, we're going to add 2 delicas. So we're just opening up that gap just a little bit more. Okay, so you can see how that sits in nicely as we're going around. Okay, so that's really all there is. Just working in your red delicas and adding 2 red delicas in the big gap. Piece of cake. So I got busy on row 24. I finished row 23 and I'm working on row 24, which you'll see it starts with a gold 11 where we put in there, and it will sit halfway between your other 2 spots. So you can see this one, we're directly halfway. You can actually track it if you put your needle through, through your beads. You would actually go from gold bead to gold bead on a diagonal. Okay, so that's all that there is. It's just 4 of your red delicas, treating your delica pair as 1 bead, of course, and then just adding the gold beads in between the existing gold beads. Just like there, right there. Right in the middle. There it goes. Okay, so for row 25, what we're doing is we're just working in red delicas with 2 red delicas over our previous 2 red delicas. Nice and easy. And then row 26, it's just 1 delica per stitch, just treating our pair as 1 bead. Nice and straightforward. And I will come back for row 27. Okay, so that's row 25, 26 in. Row 27, we're going to come back to using our little 15s again. So we're going to work 1 stitch. Most of the stitches are going to be done in your size 11 delica, but then when you come to the 2 delicas, the pair, you're going to add a pair of 15 delicas. It's just gonna, because you can see we're kind of at the widest point right now over the tubing, so we're going to start decreasing, and that's the first little step of our decrease. So that's all there is to it, is replacing the 11 delicas with 15 delicas in that gap, and then just 1 bead all the way around. And the next row is just 1 11 delica in each stitch. So we'll come back after those 2 rows. So having worked rows 27 and 28, we're now ready to do row 29. And we're going to change direction because it's a little difficult to work this way now. So we want to be working with our work this way so that we can get in here and have a clearer view. So to change direction, all you need to do is, my thread's coming out of this bead right here. I'm going to go in the bead below it and then up on a diagonal through those 3 beads. And that changes my direction. Okay, so for row 29, we are going to be working in our reds. And then when we come to our gap, our gap of 2 15s, we're going to add 1 of our gold 11 beads. Okay, and then just working around. So nice and easy, 11 delica in red, in the regular stitches, and in the double stitch you want your 11 seed bead. And you can see we're pulling it really nice around the tubing now. We're over halfway and we're going to be decreasing. Okay, so keep working. You'll notice that your tubing might have opened up a little bit, and when we close the beadwork, as we wrap around this, you'll notice that this little gap will disappear. So it's okay if you've got it like that. It opens up a bit, but if you've measured correctly, it's going to close as we go. Okay. All right, so finish this row, and then the next row you can work just in the D beads, just, you know, one red bead per stitch, and we'll come back for the next one. So you can see how it's rolling right the way over the tubing now. And we're just going to kind of do a little static row on the next one, just because it's not closing up fully yet. So we're just going to add a little bit more of a leeway row. And we're going to do that by just working in our 11 delicas until we get to our gold bead. And on top of the gold bead, we're just going to put 2 of our 15 delicas. It'll just give us the leeway that we need on that row, so we don't have gaps. Okay, so keep working around, and on the next row you can just work in D beads, again treating that little H pair as one bead. I'll come back and show you where we are after that. For row 33, what we're doing on this row is where we have our gold beads and our little 215s, where the point is, we're just going to add a single delica. So we're going to close that up a little bit. Then we're going to continue working to our next gap. Make sure you don't get your threads caught around there. And in the next gap, we're actually not going to decrease. We are going to keep our little 15s, if I can find them. And we're going to add another 2 15 delicas into that gap. We're doing this because we're going to keep this. This is where we'll be increasing for our wings. So we're going to close this one up and keep this one open. So then you just continue around, and you can work on the next row too, which is just on in red delicas, using 1 bead per stitch, and just treating those 2 beads, the 2 15s, as 1 bead. Okay, so I'll come back after that and we'll start doing our increasing. For row 35, we're going to be working around in delicas, 1 bead per stitch, until we get to our little gap where we've had our 2 15s. And here, this is where we're going to increase for our wings. So when you get to that spot, you're just going to add 2 delicas. And the thing I will say about this row is do not pull this tight, because when we start making these points coming out, they're going to end up coming this way. They tend to lean out this way. And so we have to manipulate them after a few rows to lean this way, down in towards the points. So having a little bit of a looser thread there gives us that leeway to do that. So, you know, it saves a risk of breaking your thread. If you pull this really tight, when we manipulate, you're going to lose your thread. You can break your thread. Okay, so that's all there is on this row. loose tension and 1 bead per stitch, 2 beads in our big gaps. I'll come back for the next row when we're working our increases into our increases. For row 36, we're going to work just again red seed beads, our red delicas, and as we're working around, when we get to our pair, what we're going to do is work the same way as we did for our horns. We're going up through the first bead of the pair. We're going to add 2 beads and we're going to come down the second bead of the pair. And it can be a little fiddly at this point because they're laying side by side. So you can see it's going to twist, and just make sure that you're getting them to lay correctly. And you'll see what I mean, that they'll tend to go this way rather than that way. For them to lay right, it's much easier to see it done on the outside than the inside. We just want those to lay correctly. We don't want to get those twisted because it will throw everything off. Okay, so if you can see right there, it's easier to have them laying out, and then we'll have to pull them in after a few rows. Okay, so just continue around. So that's all you've got. You'll have 12 points where you increase. And it'll be right in the middle of your wings. So you're trying to get them to lay that way is a lot more difficult than having them lay out. Anyway, get those in, make sure that your threads are not twisted. It's hard to tell at this point, you know, you see how it'll twist, pull it back around, and pull it there. Again, keep your tension fairly loose on this row because we are going to have to manipulate those points. Okay, so that's all you're going to do. Lots of red delicas all the way around, increasing in your points right in between your horns. And you can do this for the next, this is row 36, you can do rows 37 and 38, all in the same way. Okay, so we'll come back for row 39. And we'll be putting some spots back in. So you can see here we are after row 38. You can see what I mean by these pulling this way. Once we've got more, we're able to manipulate it a lot more. So we're not going to do that yet. We're going to keep working around, and this time for this row we're going to add some spots. So you should be where I am, which requires 3 delicas. And then you would be adding your spot, your gold 11 seed bead. And then you would have 1 delica up to the point. Then you would work your increase. One delica. And then it would be the seed bead. Okay, and then you're going to work 4 seed beads, 4 of the delicas I mean. Let's pull that way, and we can work it. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we're ready for another seed bead, And you can see that this seed bead, this is the center one, it sits directly below this gold bead and right above the red 3mm. So that's how you know you're in the right place. And then we would finish that repeat with 1. Then we would start the repeat again. So basically, you're just adding your gold bead in the center, and then at the side, 4 beads in between. And you've got 1 bead before you do the increase, 1 delica before you do the increase. And so you're going to just work that row. And then your next 4 rows, because there's 4 rows in between putting our gold beads in, you're going to just work 4 rows, all in the red delicas, keeping increasing in the points. And I will join you after that. Okay, so here we are after having done row 43. I'm now going to turn our little points inwards. It's easier to do when you've got more, so if you wanted to leave it a few rows more, that's fine too. There's a little knack to it, and it's kind of a little twist and fold. So you can see you've got some flexibility going on. The only issue is down here where the point. That's where we don't want to break that. So what we're going to do is we're going to lift this section up, okay, and you can see that this is pointing down, and then you just want to pinch that there and turn it. Okay, I'll show you that again. You lift this all the way up, so this section here between the points, and then as you push this down, you lift this up. If you put your nail down the center, you can ease it down into a point so the point's going the other way, and you can pinch it in. Okay? I'll show it again. When you pull this up, you'll see it's leaning that way. And that's what we want. You just underneath the other hook, you nail into there, and just gently easing it. Some are easier to do than others, depending on the tension. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of playing. If you lift these up, sometimes that helps. There we go. It's going to go now. Oh, it's going to be a stubborn one. Pinch, 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 and it turns. And we didn't break a bead. And that was a tricky one. So, up, twist it, pull this section up, make that into a point. You see it's going into the point there, and if we can continue to lift this up and pull down, pinching, it goes in. So lift it up, pinch it in, lift this section up, give that a pinch, pull it up. This one's going to need a little bit more coaxing. Sometimes you can just play around with the flexibility a little bit and turn that one up, gently down. Okay, so keep showing you so you get the hang of it. Pull it up, little twist, pull that side up. Give it a pinch, and there I think we bust a bead, which is good because if I busted a bead I can come back and show you how to fix it. Yep, there we go. I think we have a bead busted in there. There it goes, see? So we're missing a bead in there now. So we'll come back and I'll show you how to fix that, because it's great when it happens because we can fix it. All right, turning. And there we go. Some go easier than others. Let's This one's like all halfway there to start with. There we go. There we go. Twist, and there we go. Up, down, pinch it in. Just easing them around. And there we go. We are all the way around. And we only broke one bead. Okay, so I will come back and show you how to do that. I'm going to weave a thread in so that we can do that. Okay, so here we are going to fix our broken bead. You can see we have a bead missing right there. See that hole? There's not meant to be a hole there. Okay, so I've woven a thread in and I'm just weaving it down so it comes out before that bead. I'm trying to do this. Not as easy on camera as it is not on camera. Okay, so just weaving down to exit the bead right before, you can see that's right before the hole. You can see we've got that hole right there and our thread is coming out right here. Now I'm going to add my bead and I'm going to go through, if you imagine that it's just working that peyote row, oh, don't drop your bead, and so you're going into the next bead just like you'd be working the peyote. Okay, and you see, if you can see this, it's sitting up a little bit. We can see this one. You see how it's sitting a little bit up there? We want that to settle down. So we've got to go turn and come through the bead below the one our thread's coming out of. And it can be a little tricky, just getting the angle in. So you just want to play so that you can get your needle through. There we go. Okay, so you can see I'm underneath and you can see our bead stuck up. As we pull this in, because our thread's going to get caught on every point available. Okay, so now we're back to go through our added bead, our replacement bead. And then we're going to go through the next bead. So it's basically you're working those two rows, because when you do peyote you have two threads going through each bead. So that's our second thread going in. And if we can get it off all the points. As we pull this in, just too much for it to get caught on right now. And as we pull that in, you can see it sits nicely in. You can just ease it. It's not going to sit completely in because we have a thread behind it, but we can work that. And just coming back through the other way. Turned again, and I'm going to go through it again. And on this pass, I'm going through the added bead, and on this pass I'm going to go make basically a ladder stitch or a square stitch, whichever way you want to think of it, and go through the bead above it. You see that? That just gives it another help to stay in place. And it's good if you don't get your thread in a knot too. Okay, so as I pull that in, that just gives it another level, and you just ease that in with your finger. So now we don't have a hole anymore. So here we are after turning our points and fixing beads. We're ready to work on row 44. And for row 44, if you're in the same place as me, you'll be working 3 red delicas, a gold seed bead, a red delica, and then working your increase in the point. And the way to know where your gold beads are, when you have a gold bead, if you count up on the diagonal, 1, 2, 3, 4 beads, you know you're ready for another gold. So that's the way that you can go each way. You can see the gold. If I count this way, 1, 2, 3, 4, this is going to be my gold bead. And you can see that that'll leave space for 4 red beads in between. So it's always good, because if you get lost on exactly where your thread should be, if you've added new thread or confused yourself, it's always good to be able to know exactly where those beads need to be. Okay, so here we are with another one. It's just getting used to having things in a different direction when you've been working one way and you change direction, or you know, like we've changed on the horns, on the wings. Just getting used to holding it a different way. Just little issues. Once you get used to it, after a couple of points, you'll have it down again. Okay, so there's 3 and there's our 4. We're ready for another gold bead. There we go. 4 more of our red delicas. And then we've got our gold. Change the angle a little bit more. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then our gold. And our red into our point, ready for our increase. Okay, so you can see how that's looking. Look at it from that direction. Okay, so you see we're putting 4 gold beads on that section. So work that all the way around, and then you've got 3 more rows of just working in red delicas, increasing in the points. And then after that, we'll be back. Okay, so here we are to work on the base. And if you remember, we did a dividing row. I said that beads would be going that way and this way. We're going back to that. This is where we're utilizing it. So what you want to do is weave a thread so it's exiting a white bead, one of those that are standing up, right above this gold flower. So in the center of this gold flower, the point, or the gold spot, whatever you want to call it, right above there, the white bead. That's where we're going to start. So my thread is coming out of there. Whether we can show you it right there. See? Okay, and that's where we're starting. Our first row is just done in black beads. So this is our C bead. And your main problem here is watching all the points, because it's hard with long threads and lots of points to get caught on them. But you don't have to hold your work on this. You can just leave it on the table and on your bead mat and work away. I've got my snazzy new round bead on it board. That's like much better for working round things if I've got a round board. Much better for my camera. Okay, so as you can see, I'm just working into those beads and it's standing nice and straight up, which is what we want. And once I've done this, which is row 1, I'm then going to do a row 2, which will be using the red delicas, which is the D bead. So you can do that. So finish row 1 and then do row 2, and I'll come back for row 3 when we're going to add a spot. So there you can see I've got row 2 in now, and row 3 we're going to add our spots. And if you start in the right place, you'll be doing one of the D beads, the red, and then one of the gold 11 seed beads, our spot. And if you look at this, make sure you're in the right place. You want to be center of these two spots. You can see right over this little black section here. That's where your spot needs to be. It's also straight out on your points. Okay, so over the center of your points. Just so you get them in the right spot. And then it's just 4 beads in between the spots. So 4 red, so 4 red, and time for another gold spot. You can see right over our point. See those? Right over the points. Okay, so that's this row. And the next row you can work, which is just red beads all the way around. And I'll come back for row 5. So here we are after row 4. So you can see we've got this nice little edge standing up here. And you can see how this is dented in, because this is where our tubing is going to go. We're going to do a couple more rows before we add our tubing, but you can see we've got that little curve going on. As we're going to bring this out now, you can see we've got that little dent in there that our tubing's going to sit in. So 2 more rows before we add our tubing. And the next row, row 5, we're going to start by adding 2 of our little 15 delicas over our gold bead. That's a real true beginning of our increasing. And then we have our 4 11 size delicas, our regular delicas, in between. And that is all there is for this row. Nice easy rows. 2 of our little H beads. And back to our regulars. So you can work that row, and then the next row is just the size 11s, the red delicas, all the way around, and then we'll come back to put the tubing on. So work this row, row 6, and then we'll come back for tubing. Okay, so here we are after row 6, and you can see we've got a really nice place to put our tubing now. And so we're going to do this. It's about 8 inches that you need, but it's always good to just pull it around nice and tight, see where it overlaps. Okay, and then just snip it. A little bit of the 4mm, and I think my tubing came in a bit tighter this time. I order the same stuff and it comes in, sometimes it's a tight fit and sometimes it's a loose fit. I won't need that much. There we go. So we know we can just put that baby in there and join it together. See, I cut my tubing on an angle, so that's not going to work. I need to cut this straight. There we go. And then that should, such a tight fit on this one. And that's going to give us our tube. So there it's joined together, and we should be able to just squeak it over these beads. Remember to put your needle and thread through, otherwise it'll be caught on the wrong side. And you should just be able to ease this on. There we go. And just push our beads back over. And we're ready for our next row. So for row 7, we're just going to work in the red 11 delicas, and then when we come to the gap, the larger gap that has the 2 15s, we're just going to put 2 11s over that. So that's all there is on this row. And we'll come back for the next one because we're going to be adding a spot right there. Okay, so I'll work this row and then we'll come back and we'll add another spot. Okay, so row 8, and just remember, like we did before, push your beads over your tubing so that your tension is right. We want those rolling over the tubing. So for row 8, you're going to start with 1 of the red beads, then you're going to go in your gold 11 seed bead, and then you'll work 3 of your red delicas. Then you're back to the start. So basically between your golds are sitting between your golds, and you've got 4 red beads in between. Okay, so gold, then 4, gold, 4, and of course you'll be finishing off with 3 at the end to finish this row. And for the next row, you can work that too. You're going to work it again in red delicas, and when you come to your gap of 2 red delicas, you're going to put 2 more red delicas on top. Okay, so I'll come back for row 10. So work rows 8, row 9, back for 10. Okay, so here we are after row 9, and you can see that the beads are beginning to wrap over the tubing. And row 10 is simply, you're going to add 2 of our little 15 delicas over the gold beads, and then work your 4 regular 11 delicas in the other stitches, and then you're back to having the 2 15s over. So that's row 10, and you can work row 11. Row 11 is done all in the size 11 delica, and you're just going to be adding 1 bead per stitch, and you'll add 2 delicas over the large gap, over the 2 delicas. Okay, so you can work that row too, and we'll be back for row 12. Okay, so here we are after rows 10 and 11. We're definitely getting the look of the bowl now, of our base on it. And for row 12, we're going to work 4 stitches in our size 11s, 1 bead per stitch. Oh, lots of points going on. So that's 3 and 4. And when we get to our little 15 gap, we're going to add 2 11 delicas over that. So we're just increasing there that little bit. Okay, so that's what we're going to work all the way around. And the next row we'll be adding spots, but it's a little bit different. So I'm going to come back for row 13. Okay, so here we are for row 13, and you can see we're adding 2 of our gold beads. This is not something that we've done before, and the reason for this is that when we're working on a big circumference, our increases can be a lot smaller and more gradual. When you're working on a smaller circumference, then you've got more increases to put in a short space of time. So it's something I really enjoy doing in tutorials, is showing you the differences like this. It's all math. I like math. One of those freaky people that do. Anyway, so it's basically this row. You're working in the reds. When you get to your gap, you're adding the 2 11 seed beads in gold. And you can see that's going to bring that over the tubing. We're almost at the halfway point around the tubing. So a few more rows and we'll start decreasing. Okay, so work on that row. And on the next row, you can work, it's just in red seed beads. You're going to just add 2 over the gap, and it'll be 1 all the way around. So 2 regular sized delicas over the gap, and that's it for row 14. So we'll come back for row 15. Okay, Mickey made a mistake, so it's tip time. You see right here, as I'm working this row, I missed a bead there. I skipped the bead. My thread's there, but no bead. So how you do that, if you ever come across this, add 2 beads. So you're going to add your next bead, and you would be going through this bead, but it's missing. So we've got to add that one in too. So I've got 2 beads on, and where my missing bead is, I'm going to go below where my missing bead is. And I'm just going to pull this in. I have a long thread to work with here. So of course it's going to get caught on everything. So I'm going back through that bead. You can see I'm going back through the bead below. So when I pull this in, you can see it just starts to sit in place. And then we make it go better in place by going through it, which is how we would have gone through it normally. And there you go. We've added that bead in that we somehow missed. Okay, so that's a time-saving tip. I don't have to go back and pull out the rows. I can just add it in like that. Nobody will know. Okay, so I'm going to finish this row up. Seems we just have a couple of stitches here. My long thread is getting caught on everything. And our last bead, and we're stepping up. Just going to get caught there. There we go. Okay, so now you can see that that's laying nice and smoothly over the tubing. Okay, so if you're finding that this your beadwork is not sitting over the tubing nicely and it's bunching up, it might be that you cut your tubing too large. So you might want to take that off, trim a little bit and put it back on. This is a good point to do that. You know, or if your tension's too tight. That's why I keep pushing it down over the tubing all the way around, so that, you know, after each row, just keeping it there so it keeps your tension right. Okay, so now we're on to row 15. And row 15, we're actually starting to decrease just a little bit here. And that is over these 2 golds, we're going to put 2 15s. So we're just sizing that down just a little bit. Oh, long threads and lots of points. Okay. Long thread and lots of points does not work well. Okay, so here you go. So that's all you're doing. You're working 1 bead in each stitch, 2 beads on top of your 2 golds. Okay, so I'm going to go struggle with that on my own and get my thread caught on everything and make our thread shorter for the next row. So we'll come back for row 16, which again is a little bit different. Okay, so there we have row 15 in, and before I go to row 16, I'm going to change direction because it's getting to the point where we really need to. I try to keep it going one direction so you can keep your fingers out, you know, smoothing over your beads over your tubing. But there comes a point when it's a little bit difficult to do, especially when we start decreasing. So we're going to change direction, and to change direction, I have my thread coming out here, and I'm just going to go underneath the beads underneath and then up in a diagonal. And it's a good place to do this too because it's a simple row. All we're going to do is work our red delicas normal, except where we come to this point, and then we're going to put 3 of our 15s in. So over the 2 delicas in that gap, we're putting 3 15s. This is our like largest row. You can see it's like halfway on the tubing. So after that, you've got 4 beads in between, just your 11 delicas. And 4. And then we're back to our gap. So we want our 3 15s in there. Okay, so you can see that that's just giving it a really nice wrap. Okay, so I think you'll find that a bit easier to work, and if you can hold it like that so you're still keeping your beads on the tubing, that works well too. Okay, so work this row and then we'll come back for some more decreasing. We're going to close this in on the tube. Okay, so here we are for row 17, and we're going to start some decreasing here. This row is really nice and easy because it's kind of that preemptive row, so it's nice and simple. Just working in your 11 delicas, 1 bead per stitch until you get to your 2 bead gap, and you're just going to put 2 in there. Okay, so that's all there is for this row. The beginning of our downsizing. So work on this row and we'll come back for the next one. Row 18 coming up. So that's row 17 in. Row 18, we're bringing back our 2 eye beads, our 2 golds, and they're going to sit over those 3 15 delicas. And this will just tighten this up quite nicely. And it's just your regular 4 red delicas in between, so pretty easy, nothing difficult. I know the bowl looks daunting when you see pictures of it, but it's really not that difficult to make. Just takes some time. Okay, so that's all you're doing all the way around. You see as I pull that now? As I pulled my thread tight there, you see how that's rolling right over the, get the angle on this, right over the tubing. That's what we're looking for. Okay, so I will meet you back for row 20. Actually, row 19. Okay, so now we've got row 18 in. Row 19 is all done in the red delicas, the size 11s. And we're just going to work around putting the 2 delicas over our 2 delica gap. It's an interesting angle to be able to show you, and bead at the same time. You can see that lovely roll that we're getting? See how nice it's rolling over that tubing? That's what we're looking for. Okay, so you will find that this row does cinch in a little bit. It closes up around these 2 gold beads. So you will be able to give it a nice tug and have it curve all the way around. So you can start to increase your tension from this point. Once you start going down, you can use a tighter tension. When you're opening things up, you want a looser tension. Closing them down, tighter tension. Okay, so work that row and we'll come back for the next one, which will then be row 20. Row 20. Okay, so again, another easy row. They're all easy. Come on, this is not rocket science. Okay, so all we're doing is we're adding our delicas 1 bead per stitch until we get to our 2 golds. And on top of the 2 golds, we're putting 2 red delicas. Just cinch that down a little bit more. You can see it's just wrapping over there beautifully. And we have 1 more row to go after this one. Row 21 is just working in our delica beads and putting 2 beads over our 2 bead gap. We've got a 2 bead gap there. You see for the next row? And so you'll just put 2 beads on there. So finish this one, row 20 and row 21. And then we will be working on the wings. So we're going to be doing this down here. So now we've got the roll all covered, the tubing's all covered, and it's a really nice finish for the bowl. We have to do our first row for our wings. And you can actually pull this down off the tubing that little bit as we go around so that it's easier to get into the beads. And you're just going to work a row of delicas. Basically we're doing exactly as we have been doing, and that is 1 bead per stitch until we're over these 2 beads here. Alright, this is where we're going to do our increases for our points. So we're going to have our 2 beads on top of those existing 2 delicas. But when we come on our next row, we're going to be splitting those. So don't pull this thread too tight. We're in there now. If you pull it back so that you can get in, don't tighten this row up because it's got to have a little bit of give so that we can open these beads up. So that's all you need to remember on this row is loose tension. 1 bead over 1 bead, 2 beads over 2 beads, and loose tension. Okay, and we'll come back to split those up for row 2. So now we've got that first row in, we're going to work on row 2. Row 2, we're going to add one of our gold seed beads over our 2-hole gap, which is right here. Hard to see, it's right on the angle of that point. So once we have that in, we're then going to work in our red delicas. They're difficult to work and show you. Pulling this down so you can see it a little bit better. Okay, so I'm going in and I'm working in my delicas. 2 stitches. The second stitch, I'm just going to go through the first of that pair. A little tricky. Then we're going to add 2 beads. This is going to become our wing point. So I'm adding 2 of our red delicas and going through the second bead of that pair. Like, hold your thread tight down so it separates them, and then pop those babies in there. Okay, so you can see that. So then we're just going to work our 2 stitches. One and 2 in the red delicas. Make sure you don't get your thread stuck around your beads. And then we've got another gold bead in for that point that sits over our 2. So that's what we're working. If you can see this here, as we work it starts to lean out, so it gets a lot easier. It's a little tight in there right now, but no worries, you can do this. I have every faith in you. Continue doing this, and then after this you've got 3 rows just working with the red delicas. 1 bead per stitch and increasing in the points. And I'll come back after those 3 rows and we'll be adding another spot. But I think you know what you're doing because you've done these. So we'll be back for the next spot, and that would be row 7. Okay, so here we are after row 6, and you can see our little wings growing. These rows are a little tricky, especially when you're getting to like the 5th and 6th rows. And the trick is to pinch this here so that you can actually work. You see how this is? You can actually just pinch that up so that your beads are forward. You can see we're actually getting, it's not as bad as with these wings. They are actually going more into what they're gonna look like. They're turning up in the right direction. So it's just a gentle turn. These are flexible, and as we're working, you'll see what I mean by twisting and turning them a little bit. Okay, so we are on row 7. And row 7 starts with a gold bead for our spot. So we do 1, and then we have 2 beads into the point. 2 of our red delicas to the point. And then this is what I mean by twisting it. If you remember the action, the twisting action on the wings when we turn the top wings, see how I've just twisted that little bit so that I can see this whole section? It works really well. So there we get our 2 in our point, and then we need to work 1 and 2, and then we have our gold bead to our spot, and then we need 4 of the red. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Time for another gold. And then we have the 2 red into the point. Okay, so now we're going to do that little flip here. We're going to just push that down a little bit so this one can come up. And then as you just pinch on the base of the point, you can get your thumb beneath your beads lean this a little bit this way. Just a little bit of play. There we go. Just a little bit of nudging the beads, the points into the right direction. These are much easier to put in place than the top ones. Okay, so where's our 1, our 2, and then we go into a gold. And of course we get it caught on the points. I did about 3 rows and didn't get it caught on a point once, because I wasn't on camera. Now it's going to go every one. Every stitch now. Okay, so there's 1, this is 2. 3. 4, and a gold bead. One, 2 into the point, and we're going to do a little flex here. So what we're doing is we're pushing down on this side and forward on this side. So back and forward. And then when we can do the opposite here, where we're pushing back and bringing this forward. Better if I do it this way. If I just pinch underneath. There you go. So you get that nice flat area to work on. Okay, so 2 in our point. Two beads. Two beads, and then back to our gold. Okay, so I think you get that it's just a little bit of manipulation of the points as we're going around our wings. So that's kind of how you're ending up looking as you work on them. Everything's kind of going in like a spiral. But it actually is going to be much easier putting these into position than it was for the top wings. Somehow it just works. You can see that just has gone so easily, which makes life much easier, right? Okay, so finish this row, and then you're going to work 4 more rows just in the reds, and then we will be back. So here I'm working row 8. And an interesting thing is happening is that the points are pretty much going into position with very little effort. So it's a really good time to do it when they're going on their own. As we've had this up and we kind of twist this down for the next section. And just ease your points up and out. Then pinch underneath. And just turn those up. See how that point goes in? So without too much hassle, that's working. And then once they're like that, you can work the point this way. So that's working out quite nicely. Those points are, some of them almost turn on their own. Okay, so manipulating your points. turn it that way to do this section. And as we would pinch underneath, flatten that out. And then with this section, we just want to see how that's like almost there. It takes very little to just push that up and pinch this down. Push it up and pinch it down. See? So you can do that on row 8. or no, row 9, whatever feels comfortable for you. It is getting fairly easy to do that. And continue on. So I will meet you back for the point when we're actually joining our points together, putting our edging on and finishing joining our wings. Okay? Okay, so now that we've finished our wings on the bottom and we've got our wings on the top, we're going to put the edging in and join the wings, the wingtips together. So you can see here I'm working with a 15 seed bead in the same gold as the 11s, and then I'm going to add a 4mm fire polish. And what we're going to do is go up through on the top wing, up through those 2 beads right there. You can see those. So we're going to go up, we're going to cross over and come back down the next 2. As we pull that in, we're going to go back through our fire polish and back through the second bead on the point of the base wing. So that's what we're looking at. Okay, so then we're going to work around to the next point and do exactly the same thing with every single point. Okay, so you can see how that's going to look. This will also help with the curve on the wings. Putting a 15 in, it'll tighten that curve up and give a really nice curve on the wing, on the U of the wing. In my original design, I had 11s on here, and I was never happy with them. They created a fluted effect that I wasn't really happy with. When you live with it for a while, it's like, yeah, I wish I'd done that differently. So I'm doing it differently this time. It was also kind of distracting, particularly when you've got a design going on inside. That would have been a little bit busy. You can see how nice that makes that U shape go. See that? Isn't that nice? I love 15s for that purpose. They just finish things really nicely. Okay, we're almost up to the point again. Just so I can show you one more time. Okay, so we're into the point, adding our 4mm, going through the first 2 beads on the top wing, and then crossing over and coming down the 2 on the opposite side. Pull that in, back through our fire polish and our first bead right there. snug that up. So you can see the look we're going for. So work that all the way around, and I'll meet you back when we get back to this point right here. Okay? Okay, so you can see all the bottom is complete. All my wings are attached. And now the only thing I've got to do is to put our edging around the top, on the top wings. So what I'm going to do is, I've still got some thread here, so I'm going to use it up. I'm going to go up through the fire polish, and then I'm going to step up through the first bead right there. And now I'm ready to work around here, around the top wings with my little 15s. And what I'm going to do when I come to when I come back down to the fire polish is I'm going to connect it in the same way that I connected the first set, only this time I'll be connecting it with the 4 beads on the bottom wing. So once I get round there, I'll come back and show you. Okay, so now I'm ready to put my last 15 in down here. So as I'm going through that, I can go all the way through my fire polish, and then I can go up the 2 beads of the wing, might have to do them one at a time. There's 1, and there's 2. And then I'm going to turn, just as we did before, and come down those 2. And then I can go back through my fire polish and straight through that first bead. And I'm ready to continue all the way around. So there you go. I'll come back when it's fully complete. But now you've got that lovely shape going on. Those 15s just really pull that oval together. Okay, so we'll be back when I'm completely finished. Okay, so there we are, all complete. We have all our edgings on and our bowl is completely finished. It's quite a sturdy bowl. I hope you enjoyed making it, and hopefully you'll do both variations. Lots of beading, but lots of fun, and definitely you've achieved something when you've made this. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you'll look out for some more of my tutorials with video classes, and we'll work together again. Thanks.